This is the lecture for Thursday, the 17th of March, 2022. ERIN BRAGH. ERIN BRAGH is the Gaelic, badly pronounced, for Ireland forever. It is St. Patrick's Day, the day commemorating the Christian saint who drove the snakes, that is the pagans, out of Ireland, making it Christian. If you ever want to see how resentment, revenge, grudges, and hatred can destroy a nation, or define it, study Irish history, especially modern Irish history. It is, as somebody who has strong Irish heritage, my mom's people were mostly Irish. Well, I'm a quarter Irish. It is really steeped in the idea that we will pay you back. The Irish, unfortunately, traditionally, it's not as true today, but traditionally have anger that runs so deep that they don't forget grudges. While Christian denominations dominate the politics of Ireland, Celtic Catholics, Anglo-Saxon Protestants, Catholics in the south, Protestants in the north, the truth is that the notion of turning the other cheek, or loving your neighbor as yourself, or forgiving your neighbor, for an island nation that professes its Christianity so strongly, those virtues are very hard to find. And I know I have Irish relatives, and I have seen grudges split families. It's nasty. So I am proud of Ireland, but I also look at Ireland and its history and its traditional culture with a good degree of horror, because anger, even if it's righteous, if you let anger define you, it's a blight, and your life is stunted. Don't believe me? Look it up. As to ancient Irish history, the myths and stuff, the Tuatha De Danann, they're fun. They're interesting. And Ireland, physically, geographically, is one of the most beautiful places on earth. If you like green and pleasant lands, the land gets incredible amounts of rain. So forests and fields and everything else, it's like the colors have been turned up to 11. Just beautiful. Dr. LeBlanc's dance troupe, the Red Hot Mamas, are in Dublin today to dance in celebration of the of St. Patrick's Day. She's here because she teaches, but she did help choreograph what they're doing. I think she was chief choreographer. So she passed up on going to Ireland to be with you. Bear that in mind. As much as I make fun of the French just to irritate her, she's pretty amazing. Anywho, any questions before we begin? Okay. So we are in the midst of the crisis. Valerian is actually arguably the low point, because captured alive. What else? Beaten and enslaved and forced to be the footstool of Shapur whenever he gets on his horse. And then he is either stuffed like a taxidermy animal, which is the one I believe. But there's another myth that's sort of based on a story also told about Marcus Licinius Crassus, who lost the Battle of Carrhae to the Parthians. Crassus, who was defined by his gold, his wealth made him a triumvirate, is said to, again in myth, have been captured alive by the Parthians and had hot molten gold poured down his throat until he dies. It's very romantic. It's very ironic. The man whose gold made him powerful was killed by molten gold. I personally don't believe it. And the same story is told of Valerian, but also I don't really believe it. There are better things to do with gold, and stuffing and mounting him and keeping him there for 125 years until the mummy rots or the taxidermy rots makes more sense. In any event, it's not fun to be him. And it's further not fun to be Valerian, because if clearing my throat. It's also not fun to be him, because his son Gallienus is the new emperor. And Gallienus does not lift a finger to release Daddy Dearest from prison from the Persians. He doesn't demand it back. He doesn't offer ransom. He does nothing. So Valerian dies, abandoned by his son. Now, does Gallienus rule the whole empire? He rules the central third. He basically rules Italy, the Danubian provinces, and North Africa. Postumus rules in the west, from Hispania up to Britain, and Odenathus and then his wife Zenobia rule in the east in the Palmyra Empire that takes over the eastern and wealthiest third of the Roman Empire. And the Persians are deterred by the Palmyrans. So Gallienus rules a rump empire, basically what's left over that hasn't been taken over by someone else. He tries his best to deal with invasions and rebellions, and he tries to display his culture that he's a man of peace, but he doesn't have time for peace. He is constantly beset by difficulties, not the least of which is one of the more creative attempts by the Goths to take wealth out of Rome. The Goths move into Greece and capture a fleet of ships, including warships. The Goths then proceed to loot every coastal town they can find in the eastern Mediterranean from the sea. You expect barbarians to come over the hills by land, but the Roman Empire was completely unprepared for a Gothic pirate fleet to sweep eastern Mediterranean of much of its wealth in the coastal cities. The Goths would come, they would take the gold they could find, they would rape, they would murder, they would burn, because they're barbarians, that's what they do, and then they'd load up their ships and keep going. So, this is a problem. And the Goths end up leaving with all that wealth. Then, in 267 or 68, the Goths are back. By the way, by this point, Dacia is gone. Dacia has been overrun. The Romans aren't going back. The Triangle has been overrun. The Romans aren't going back. The Romans are back to the old Rhine-Danube frontier. That's it. So the Goths cross the Danube, and they're invading the mainland of Greece. Gallienus gets ready to fight! And as he's getting ready to fight, his praetorian prefect and chief general, Claudius II, stabs him in the back, kills him, and takes over. Now, Claudius II is known to history as Gothicus. Claudius Gothicus is Claudius II, defeater of the Goths. That's what Gothicus means. It's like Germanicus means defeater of the Germans, and Britannicus means defeater of the Britons. Yeah. So, how does this emperor, this general, Claudius II, earn the name Gothicus? Does he block the Gothic army from despoiling Athens and Corinth and Olympia and Thebes? No, that's not going to work. What Claudius does is he lies in wait in the mountains south of the Danube at a place called Nisus, what today in Serbia is called Niš. He knows that when the Goths are done with their rapine, arsonistic, murderous rampage through Greece, they'll be coming back through that mountain pass. So he waits and lets the Goths do their thing, so that by the time the Goths are moving towards Nisus, they're drunk or hungover, they're tired, They've been doing all their stuff. They just want to drag their slaves and drag their stolen gold and silver and gems and objets du art, art objects, in front case, of course, back across the Danube so that they can enjoy it at home. And it's this tired, partied out, spent Gothic force that Claudius hits in the narrows of that mountain pass. And he defeats them. In fact, he not only defeats them, he destroys them. Most of the Goths escape, but not with their slaves, not with their gold. They're either killed or they're reclaimed or they're lost. But what Claudius is able to do is knock the Goths back for a few generations. For over 50 years, the Goths do not materialize again as a threat to anyone on the Roman side of the border. So he earns his title, Gothicus. And then he's got great plan, and he dies of plague. So Claudius' successor, Claudius II's successor, is Aurelian, which means the golden one. And Aurelian is also a general. Aurelian is going to do what Claudius had wanted to do, what Gallienus had wanted to do, what Valerian had wanted to do. Aurelian, first of all, fortifies the city of Rome, because he realizes that Rome is now quite vulnerable and it needs walls. So he builds what are called the Aurelian walls, a new set of walls around Rome to protect it from the Barbari, the battlers. Then Aurelian goes west. He meets Postumus in battle, defeats him. And this Gallic Empire that has lasted for, well, let's see, it starts in the 240s, 250s. It's been around for about 20, 25 years. It's finally brought back into the empire by Aurelian. So the Roman Empire now rules from central Britain all the way to the east. And then Aurelian goes east. And he meets the forces of Queen Zenobia of Palmyra, crushes them, captures Zenobia, and brings her home to Rome in triumph to be humiliated before the crowds. Aurelian is restitutor orbis on his coins. That's how he's listed. Aurelianus, Caesar Augustus Aurelianus, restitutor orbis. And what restitutor orbis means, do any of you know enough Latin to guess or say what that means? Restitutor orbis. It's my terrible pronunciation. Restitutor, restorer. Orbis, of the orb of the world. Aurelian is the restorer of the Roman world because he reunifies the empire. And it's going to stay unified for a little while. After Aurelian come a series of short-lived generals. Probus is famous for having himself, he's sort of a thin, tall guy, always with a spear on his coins. And Probus is, the cult of sun worship becomes a big deal in this period of Roman history, during the crisis of the 3rd century. Sun worship hadn't been a big deal. I mean, yeah, the Greeks had Helios and so forth, but it wasn't a huge cult. But Probus is of the cult of Sol Victor Invictus. Sol Victor Invictus. Don't make Mr. Williams cry. What do you think Sol Victor, that's V-I-C-T-O-R, Invictus, I-N-V-I-C-T-U-S, what do you think it means? Raise your hand if you want to take a guess. Yes?
Sol means sun, so it has something to do with the sun.
Sun. Victor. V-I-C-T-O-R.
Oh.
What?
Sun.
Say it. What does V-I-C-T-O-R mean? Yes. I know you knew that. Because it's spelled the same way in English. Victor, as in the ever-conquering. Invictus, I-N-V-I-C-T-U-S, which is a great poem of the 1800s. Invictus. What does it mean if Victor means victory? victorious, ever victorious, invictus. What does invictus mean? I'll take it from anyone. What? No. What's the opposite? What is somebody who can't lose?
Invincible.
Invincible. That's it. Invincible. So the cult of Sol, victor invictus, is the cult of the sun, ever victorious, never conquered. Unconquerable. And that is the cult that Probus is a part of. And it's pretty big. I mean, without the sun, there's no plants, there's no animals, there's no warmth, there's no light. So it makes sense that at some point. But this Sol cult is brought in from the east. It's like the cult of Isis, or the cult of Mithra. Then there's Numerian and Carinus, or Carinus and Numerian. There's one story about, I think it's Numerian, but it may be about Carinus. They're both related. They're both from the Danube provinces. They started as common soldiers, and they eventually became emperor just by being tough generals. So, they're fighting the Persians along the Armenian frontier. And the Persians send a diplomatic representative to speak to the Roman emperor. And the Persian kings are treated like gods. They have all sorts of special ceremony. You don't approach them unless you bow. I mean, they really are treated like the representatives of Ahura Mazda on Earth. So, this perfumed, silk-wearing Persian diplomat goes into the Roman camp and is escorted, and the commander of the guard is asked, "Where's the emperor? I need to speak to your emperor." And the guard commander points over there to a guy squatting by a campfire, eating some, I think he's just eating some lentils with a little bacon in it. And he looks like a common soldier. I mean, he's unkempt, he's unshaven, he's dirty. His uniform looks like he's been fighting personally in battle. And the Persian representative cannot believe that this is the Roman emperor. But what the Roman emperor is doing is he's fighting. He's not some guy in a palace. The Roman emperor at this point is a person who puts out fires. There's an invasion in the Rhine. The emperor takes his army and fights it. There's an invasion in the east. The emperor takes his army and fights them. There's an invasion on the Danube. The emperor takes his army and fights them. By this point, the emperor is a military commander. That's his job. He doesn't really govern the empire, a little bit, but primarily he's there to fight the border wars and keep the enemies, kick the enemies out. Not keep them out, he can't do that, but kick the enemies out. And I have to admit that this makes an impression on the Persian. The Persian is like, wow, how can we defeat these guys if their king is just a tough guy? He's enduring hardships like his men. He looks like a common soldier. He looks hungry. He smells bad. How can we beat people like this? And ultimately they decide they can't. But eventually, after Carinus and Numerian are killed, a new guy takes over. And this new guy is the second most important Roman emperor after Augustus. You've probably never heard of him. The emperor's name is Diocletian. And Diocletian is going to begin the dominate. Diocletian becomes emperor in 285. So, we're going to leave things with Diocletian taking over from Numerian. Okay, more about the crisis. Geographically, Rome becomes relatively unimportant. Why? Because as time goes on, the emperor is spending all of his time between the Rhine, the Danube, and the east. Rome's not near any of those borders. If the emperor goes to Rome, it's for a brief visit. If an emperor is lucky, he may go to Rome once or twice in his entire reign. If he's lucky, many of these emperors never get to Rome. They're too busy fighting each other in civil wars, and then fighting against the Goths and the Germans and the Persians and other barbarians like the Picts from Scotland or the Berbers from the Sahara Desert. So it's battle, 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 no Rome. Even as a symbol, I mean, Rome is a symbol. But it's a symbol that has less and less to do with anything really important. The Senate of Rome. It's a symbol. So Rome is not only one city among many cities that are wonderful like it was back in the Pax Romana. Rome becomes a backwater. Yeah, the grain ships still go there. Yeah, the games go on. Yeah, the rituals go on. But Rome becomes a lot more like Athens at the end. Athens is a tourist town and a university town after their loss in the Peloponnesian War. Athens isn't an imperial capital anymore. It's a place where people go to vacation and to say, "Woo, I was in Athens." Rome becomes more like that. The fact that Aurelian thinks it's worth fortifying with new walls is pretty surprising. But Aurelian was a forward-looking guy. He was pretty smart about things. So the borders of the empire, if you haven't gotten this yet, when you double the threat on the northern frontier and quintuple the threat on the eastern frontier and pull your army simultaneously away to the heart of the empire to fight a bunch of civil wars, this is, I don't know, like electing a senile man who doesn't have strong military credentials to be the leader of the free world at a time when, I don't know, the Russians and Chinese may be feeling like taking some territory. It might just possibly bite you in the backside. Not that that would ever happen today. Well, that's a cheap shot, Mr. Genorio. It is. I know. I really do. Biden can't help suffering from whatever form of dementia or senility he's suffering from. I blame his wife for putting him in the situation where he has to be at the center of a bunch of controversies when he really deserves a well-earned retirement. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's brilliant. Maybe he is just seeming to be weak in order to draw the enemies out and then deal with them. I would be happy to be wrong about that. I really, really would. It doesn't work out for Rome. If, by the way, since I got political, because I'm being self-indulgent, if one of you or any of you want to offer a different point of view, be my guest to do so. Yes?
We should stop electing so many really old people into our offices because as you get older, sometimes your brain functions start to lower and you're not the same.
No, really. Yeah, that's true. Look, one of our greatest presidents, Reagan, was in his 80s. But that's the rarity. No, we used to elect young guys. John F. Kennedy was around 40 when he was president. Richard Nixon, when he was president, was in his late 40s or early 50s. So was Gerald Ford. And then slowly, after Carter, we end up with older men. And then Clinton's younger again, and Bush is younger, and then Obama's even younger than them. And Trump was old. But Trump was very active, mentally and physically. And we have Biden. So, yeah. But it's not just Biden. Harris is, well, she's got her own issues. But Nancy Pelosi, who's head of the Congress and third in line, she's incredibly old, and she does these spastic, bizarro things that I just don't understand. Yeah, having the super old run your country doesn't usually work. There are exceptions, but not usually. Yeah.
Yeah. Generally, electing like 70 to 80-year-old people isn't going to work super well because unless you're like there are like exceptions like where like older people are able to maintain their higher brain function and as they continue to do so, if they remain active and are actually using their critical
thinking skills,
thought, then they can actually then it can actually work out and then but like as you get older, your brain, the size of your brain literally shrinks.
Well, so does everything else.
Yeah, but like some older people, as if they continue using their brain, like it can actually maintain its mass.
Yeah.
But for most people that doesn't happen, and then kind of get slower and slower and slower at. So it's not.
No, there is that. I mean, again, Trump was an exception. Trump did not act like a man his age. He didn't talk like one. You may disagree. I don't know. But I see in Trump a very active, very able guy. Whether you agree with his politics or not, that's a different story. Whether you think he was a good person or not. I don't think he was a good person. I think he was a good president, but I don't think he was a good person. There's so much out there that indicates he's not. But yeah, you've got to look like anything else. You use it or you lose it. That's true of your muscles and it's true of your brain. And even then, sometimes you can't fight off disease, like dementia is a disease. In any case, so the borders of Rome are porous. That means they're not really borders. Again, not like that, whatever happened today. Rome cannot protect its borders from foreign encroachment. What needs to happen is the emperor needs to come with his armies and drive the barbarians out. We'll talk more in detail about that when we do strategies of defense. And this fractured empire, with the Latin Empire in the west, the Palmyrene Empire in the east, and the Roman Empire in the middle, is a sign of things to come. In the later Roman Empire, it's more divided than it is unified. As time goes on, division becomes the norm. Basically, it becomes two different nations. And then one nation in the west finally falls. And that's the end of the Roman Empire, as we call it, the beginning of Byzantine times in the east. So the empire is in big trouble. Now, let's look in your notes on that page that shows the strategies of imperial defense. So it's right after the maps. I'm sorry, it's after the maps. And it's this page that has these three diagrams on it. Three diagrams. Keep going. One more page. There you are. One more page. So the top diagram was forward defense, which was the system used by Augustus and the Principate and the Pax Romana. And it works because the Roman army was better trained, equipped, and led than any of their opponents. The second, on the middle right, is elastic defense. Let's see. The white arrows are barbarian forces. And you'll see that they've crossed the Roman frontier everywhere. The river is the frontier. The hill beyond the river has been abandoned. And the city right on the river has been looted and gone through. It's basically a highway for barbarians. And the barbarians have crossed at other points. The cities are targets. And the Roman roads that are built to move the legions transport the barbarians. In fact, there's an invasion in the mid-3rd century by Germans and Goths across France into Spain. The barbarians cross the Rhine River and cross all of what becomes the Low Countries in France, cross the Pyrenees, and they loot Spain, which hasn't been at war since the Second Punic War. That's a lot of wealth. And the barbarians go back. It's like taking the highway when you're on a summer vacation. So the roads actually become a great weakness. Now, deep inside the empire, look at that city at the bottom center of the map. They've built some provisional walls. But the people that used to live in the border towns, they've gone back to the pre-Roman hilltop settlements that they used to live in before Rome came. They're filthy, they're cramped, they don't have any luxuries, but at least they have walls that you can rebuild, and they're on the top of hills, which makes it harder to take them. In fact, the only black arrows you see is from an imperial field army near the bottom, that trident-looking thing. The empire has been invaded, and the emperor eventually gets to the area with his army and drives the enemy back. That's why it's called elastic defense, because the sound effect would be boing. Okay, here's the border. This silvery line thing, this aluminum, whatever the heck it is. So the barbarians cross, and they go deep in the empire. And there's a city back here where the stool is, and the emperor finally gets there with his field army, and they've been in and looting, and he bounces them back out of the empire. And they stay there until they're ready to come back a few years or decades later. And then it's boing again. Elastic defense is the worst way to fight a war, or one of the worst. Remember how I said that it's better to fight a war on your enemy's soil? Because all of the horrors of war are on the enemy's land and happen to the enemy's population? Well, now, all the fighting's being done inside of Roman soil. And Roman communities that have been at peace for centuries suddenly realize, oh, bleep, we've got bleeping bleep bleeps coming out of the hills as our organized armed forces. Now, if we had to play that today, I am happy to say that Coeur d'Alene is a very well-armed community. And if people were to come here, and if we were to stick together, we could probably have firepower superiority and drive them away. Maybe. On the other hand, we're a city of about 50,000 people. Spokane has what, 500,000 people? Over 500,000 people? So if they were to come east, that would be a problem. Yeah.
We were watching Red Dawn the other weekend.
Which one? The one from the 80s or the one?
80s.
Yeah, Wolverines! Go on.
I love that. But it hit a little too close to home at first, so I was like, oh, wait a minute. The troops are coming in.
I remember the history teacher's Mongol lecture. It actually influences my Mongol lecture, as you will see. Because the history teacher does a good job. And as he's lecturing outside the window, you see paratroopers landing. And they're not ours. They're Cubans and Russians. Yeah.
So, if Idaho were to go to war, I feel like we'd probably have more guns than almost any other state. Maybe not Texas.
Well, Texas is just bigger.
Yeah.
We have a small population, but it's a population that's younger than most, that has more intact families than most, and that has a fighting spirit and guns and ammo more than most. So I think, and we also have a huge part of the state that's unpopulated.
Yeah.
We're almost like Alaska, and then we have this giant center of the state where nobody lives. And if we had to pull back into the wilderness, we got a lot of wilderness to use. I've thought about this stuff. I don't expect to survive, but I'll try, as I expect you would. In any case, it would be great not having to do that.
Yeah.
That would be best of all. If Idaho remains a part of a prosperous United States that is too powerful to get it to be invaded, and besides, what we have tried our best to convince foreign leaders of is, if they push us too far, we'll turn their country into black glassed over radioactive deserts. We do still have a massive force of intercontinental ballistic missiles, submarine-launched missiles, and nuclear-capable bombers. All of those are capable of destroying any nation on Earth, even China. In fact, we're, along with the others, capable of destroying human civilization. Now, it's not quite as bad as it was when I was your age. We have now, I think, maybe 10,000 nukes in the world today, give or take. When I was your age, we had over 50,000. And there were a lot more powerful bombs, too, that were used back then. So had war come around 1984, when I graduated from high school, the entire biosphere probably would have been gone, scorched. 50,000 Fahrenheit degrees is not really a good environment, even for bacteria or cockroaches. Who knows? Life may have survived, but we reduced nuclear weapons, and so did the Russians after that. In any case, it stinks to have your territory as a battle zone. It just, ask any Ukrainian. It's not something that you want to have happen. And in a modern society with our power grid and our highways and our roads and everything else that we have become very used to, All of that goes away. You're without electrical power. Getting clean water becomes difficult. Getting food becomes difficult. Getting clean becomes impossible. Getting medical care, very, very difficult. Just staying alive, even if the enemy troops don't shell you or bomb you or invade you, is a challenge. So, and most modern people don't have the skills or wherewithal to handle all of that gracefully. It's a horror show. War is hell. So the Romans, because of elastic defense, because of the weakness that they showed at the wrong moment, are paying a price, and the price is war on their territory. Now, let's talk about the army. The Roman legions of Augustus and the Pax Romana, they slaughter each other until basically they're gone. Those guys who were disciplined enough to form a testudo and hold up against all comers, no, they're gone. There are a few of them left, and they are attached to what are called imperial field armies. And at most, there are only 4 of those in the empire, usually fewer than that. 4 through the entire empire. So there are 2 types of troops. One type of troop is somebody like you and somebody like me, old men and young men. And we basically defend our homes, but we're lousy at fighting. I'm really too old. You're really too young. We can do our best. We might get some lucky shots in, but against men in their 20s and 30s who have the weapons and the organization, we're in, it's a bad situation. The field armies are not citizen soldiers anymore. They're not professional soldiers either, in the sense that they work for their country. They're mercenaries again. So the field armies are composed of men who fight for pay. And men who fight for pay are not as reliable as patriots. Patriots will fight and fight and fight because it's their country. Men who fight for pay will fight and then retreat, or fight and then surrender, because their job is to live and get paid. Rome's army's armor goes back to chainmail and actually, in some cases, cloth. Cloth armor. And the shields become round shields again. The swords sometimes stay short little gladius. Sometimes they get spathas, which are long swords. So the Roman army becomes more like the barbarians that they fight. Smaller shields, longer swords. They don't have the unit cohesion, the discipline that they used to. Roman helmets used to be these amazing things I showed you with sun brims and sweeping neck guards and ear protection. Roman helmets during this time end up being a pot helmet with 2 pieces, half a pot, riveted together. So you've got a helmet that looks basically like a big pot with a line of rivets going from the top to in the front to the top and the back. It's a much more primitive helmet. It's much less useful, and it also falls apart more easily. The sophistication that the Romans had in their armor and weapons, the pilum, that's gone. They have spears again. So it's as if the technology level of the Romans, as the crisis develops, gets lower and lower and lower until the Roman army is not significantly much more advanced than the barbarians they're fighting. Over the centuries, the barbarians have gotten more sophisticated, and the Romans, during the crisis, really loses a lot of their edge. This all matters. Economics. I have a word for you. That word is donative. D-O-N-A-T-I-V-E. Donative. D-O-N-A-T-I-V-E. Donative. Comes from the same root word as our word donation. Here's what happens. A general wants to be emperor. This is all. Ooh, I gotta say this. This is all. Every single bit of it. All a problem of imperial succession. Who who becomes emperor when the old emperor dies? That's the question of imperial succession. It is never satisfactorily answered in Roman law, because to do so would be to admit that Rome is now a monarchy. So there's no law, which means anyone can be a successor. And once you start killing the other emperor to become emperor, it's civil war time again. So I'm a general. I want the empire. You're my troops. How do I get you to fight for me, not the empire? Well, I tell you, first off, I'm going to pay you a bonus just for following me. This is a donative. I will give you a bonus. I will give you a bunch more gold and silver just for following me into this civil war. And when we win, so you got to say it that way, when we win, I'm going to pay you an even bigger donative. So you, my troops, are going to get paid by me above and beyond your normal salary to fight for me to become emperor. And to earn your loyalty and to keep your loyalty, I'm going to pay you loot money. That's what donatives are. They're extra money that you shouldn't have, but you're getting it because you're fighting for me to become the next emperor. Everyone does it. Now, here's something surprising. Not everyone who fights for the Imperium wants to be emperor. There are times when generals got up, stretched, did their morning business, came out, and suddenly their soldiers, "Hail Imperator! Hail Imperator! Hail Imperator!" But you're going to be the emperor. We've decided. Yes. And that's really what it's about. The army decides their general's a pretty good guy, and he'll have to pay us more. He'll have to give us donatives. So let's proclaim him emperor. Because once we proclaim him emperor, nobody will ever trust him again. Nobody will believe that we're behind it, not him. He can't, disown us, because we'll kill him. And he can't, go to the guy who's really emperor and say, "It wasn't me, it was just the troops," because the emperor will kill him. Because he's already been proclaimed emperor. Once somebody proclaims you emperor, it's victory or death time. So the armies often, not just occasionally, often would proclaim their general as imperator in order to extort donatives from him. They, not he, would be behind it. And then a civil war would be fought. And if he wins, then he's emperor and he has to pay them again. Okay. I have told you what a donative is. And I have previously told you that Rome has about the same amount of gold and silver and gems that it had in the time of Gaius Marius. Where does the money come from? How can a general want to be emperor just come up with funds to pay their troops when there isn't extra money? How is this going to work? Wait, I know. Instead of having our silver pieces, our denarii, being 100% silver, we're going to mix in some nickel. It's cheaper. Our gold pieces are going to have an increasing proportion of copper and other base metals. We might even have a copper piece dipped in gold, or a nickel piece dipped in silver. But usually it's a full score blend, a full-scale blend. This is called diluting the coinage. I don't know if you guys still make mixed drinks. In my day, we had powdered drinks and drink juice from concentrate. Yep. The juice from concentrate is in this cardboard cylinder you take out of the freezer. You plop it in a carafe or whatever the heck it's called, a jug, and you pour in some water and you mix it up.
Yeah.
And they do that. In my day, we had syrup and we also had powder. You could do the same thing. And nobody had the same amount of water. I mean, they had a suggested amount of water, but it was usually way too thick and cloying. So what people would do, and what we did to save money, is we would add like twice the water we're supposed to. And so there was still a flavor to it, but it wasn't an incredibly strong flavor. It was drinking watered down juice. And that's diluting the concentrate. It's diluting the syrup, diluting the power. You are adding so much water that it's mostly unflavored water. Diluting the coinage is reducing the proportion of the coin that's precious metal from 100% to 70% to 40% to 20%. Now, today, money is... Oh, I don't have any paper money on me. Okay, well, that's fine, because the reality is, that's money. It's a plastic card. It's not made of gold or silver. And if I had paper, it would be paper. Funky cloth-like paper with special printing on it and threads in the fabric and a bunch of tricks to make sure counterfeiters don't get a hold of it. But it's paper. So why would somebody accept computer information on a credit card or paper in return for food or shelter or any other good or service? Because to us, money is all symbolic. A dollar is worth what a dollar can buy. It's the symbol. The American government is saying that this piece of paper is worth $1. And it's the trust in the American government that makes the money valuable. We, in other words, view money symbolically. The Romans did not. The Romans considered their coins worth exactly as much as they were weighed. So anyone who was taking coins from people would weigh them. It may be a Roman denarius, but it could be an old one that's worn down and it's actually 80% as big as it should be. Or maybe somebody's trying to cheat you. So the coins are worth how much they weigh. They're supposed to be equally heavy dollops of gold or silver. It's the precious metals that give them value. So what happens when you start adding nickel to silver or copper to gold? What happens is people begin to lose faith in the money. Because it's not worth what the coin says it's worth how much gold or silver there is. And not everyone has the ability to take the coins apart and separate out the copper from the gold or the nickel from the silver. Most people don't have that. So money begins to get called into question. And people begin to say, okay, well, this is new money and it's only about half precious metals, so it's going to only be worth half of what I can weigh it for. Or it's even less than half. And soon you end up with what is called hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is when you flood the market with money that is worth less and less and less. Hyperinflation is what happens when you have pure gold and silver coins replaced by partially gold or silver coins. So it takes more and more coins to buy the same object because there's less and less silver or gold in each coin. Finally, people just stop taking money at all because money becomes worthless. You could have an entire wheelbarrow full of coins, and they may have enough gold or silver to make one gold piece or one silver piece, and you've got hundreds of coins. Why? Because the coins don't mean anything. Because they're mostly non-gold or non-silver. I will call on you in a moment. Oh, I'll take it now.
After World War II in Germany, Germany just kept printing up more and more and more money, and then they got to such a point where with inflation that people would burn the money for heat.
Yeah,
because it was cheaper than buying firewood.
Absolutely. This is after World War I. It's in the Weimar Republic, but people, factory workers who made lousy money, would go to work on payday with a wheelbarrow, and they'd have a wheelbarrow full of Reichmarks. And that wheelbarrow full of Reichmarks, the Reichmarks weren't worth the paper that they were printed on because so much money had been printed. Not that that would ever happen again. Oh, in the Obama administration and Biden, they've been printing money like it's going out of style. You just flood the market with countless amounts of new dollar bills. That'll never bite us in the backside. The dollar won't have less and less buying power by the laws of supply and demand. You have more dollars, you have. No, we won't have inflation. Oh, wait, we do. We have the worst inflation we've had since I was younger than you, since the 1970s. So, hyperinflation causes money to be called into question, and the result of this is the return of a barter economy in parts of the empire during the crisis. That is where we will leave things with hyperinflation. Any questions, comments, or thoughts? Yes?
On the corner of new gas station on Celsius.
Yeah.
Their gas prices are going to $2.99 a gallon.
What?
$2.99 a gallon.
That's low by today's standards.
Yeah.
They're taking a heck of a loss to get business. That's what they're doing. I'll remember that.
Yeah.
But I also remember when $2.99 was ridiculously expensive. I remember when gas was less than $1 a gallon. And even a couple of years ago, gas was more like that. Oh, but the election had nothing to do with that. Bye.